go ahead and get on down into it, I suppose. So one of the first things that I like that we did with Raw, for example, was kind of starting on a genre analysis basis, figuring out where we would kind of each categorize this. Personally, when it comes to Eraserhead, I think we can all agree off top it's surrealist. It's like very out there,
yeah, David
nightmare
Lynch
landscape.
is just all surrealist.
Yeah, he's completely a surrealist director. So I think it would be completely fair to say that it is a surrealist film. I personally would. Here's the thing: is a lot of the horror, if we're going with it, is more of the horror of the landscape around them. Really, what I feel like this film does is it sets up a world that you're not familiar with, and it throws you in, similar to how you are in just real life. You don't know this world, and you kind of get thrown in. And it tries to show the fear and anxiety surrounding being a young person there. So I think that it's really kind of a bit character heavy, even though they don't really say a shit ton. And so generally for that reason, I would actually say it's a psychedelic, or not a psychedelic, what's the word I'm looking for? There's the ones that are usually within the like it's all about getting into your head and psychological thrillers.
Yeah,
it's more like a psychological drama. So
okay.
That's what I would say is it is, with then having like certain horror elements. Like the baby is probably the most horror element that they have.
Yeah, but I would say that so. Yeah, that's the most horror.
Okay. Well, so I would say it's like
especially when he cuts
surrealist-
open the bandages.
Yeah, a surrealist psychological drama with horror like elements. Does that sound fair? Does anybody have any like take on what they would think the genre might be?
I mean, I agree with that.
You agree with that? Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that's fair. So then we can kind of swiftly move past that. Yeah.
It's interesting. I was thinking, because the like categorical. I mean, I don't know what you guys have seen, but like we had in film school like realist films,
Yeah.
which are like documentaries. A little bit between that, but then you have like classic films, which is just the generic shit.
Mm-hmm.
And then like expressionist films, which is like surrealist stuff.
Yeah.
Like I haven't watched much of this at all. I usually tend down towards like realism stuff. That's usually what I've enjoyed the most, like documentaries or like stuff like Oppenheimer.
Okay.
And then classic stuff I've kind of not liked as much recently. But like Videodrome and like getting into like Titan and this is the furthest. I think this is definitely the furthest along. So it's been interesting watching it and trying to think back on it over the last day.
Yeah, no, I think that I personally like I've had a lot of engagement, especially when I was young, with like just H.G. Wells and like all sorts of like old sci-fi, Lovecraft, the Time Machine type shit, or The Invisible Man, for example. Which is why, like, when I watched, I was probably in a bad space. So that's kind of another reason I was critical of The Invisible Man. It didn't take a lot of the elements of the original, and it kind of twisted it in a lot of ways. But I think now that I look back on it, it really actually was pretty decent. But so like I interacted with all sorts of like that type of stuff, and then I interacted with a lot of slashers. So then when also I would go and I'd watch like old television shows, like Mork and Mindy was like the first show that Robin Williams was in, and it's like this kind of a slightly surrealist thing, but it's also in the classical realm where he's an alien that comes down and learns the ways of Earth through this like lady friend that he has, and they end up like getting together and all this other stuff. Or like Alf is this fucking weird monster thing that has 6 stomachs. And so I would go back and I'd engage with all those things. And then I think that like the idea that movies are somewhat like dreamlike and they can convey a dreamlike state in some ways has always been super interesting to me. So when my dad recommended us Videodrome, it was almost like a secondhand nature to just like move on down. And also, like, I've always been very like into character building, and my grandma would literally be like, well, why do you think they did that? What does that mean? What does the color of the curtains mean? That type. I've grown up in an English family. My grandfather has a PhD in English and was a professor, and he would like just go through all of the shit of like what it means and be a grammar Nazi and everything else. So that's why like character building and world building, I think, to me, are very fun, and you can get that in a little bit more classical stuff. But even then, I think you still get the best world building from things like J.R.R. Tolkien, right? Like you get these more fantastical things, and you can get these really in-depth worlds. I think obviously because we know about our world already, that's why it's hard for me. I like to engage more with those like separated stories. Although I do say I think documentaries of course have their place, but I've always been one that doesn't really trend towards documentaries personally. So that's why when it comes to things like Eraserhead, I have always been curious how people of more mainstream tastes would feel about it, because it is something that it does feel like is like I just got lucky to have like Jason, who's also into surrealist shit. Like I showed him The Lighthouse, and like he was just in instantaneously, like shit like that. So I think though it is a very specific taste, and I think it might even be like a very acquired taste. I think you have to work through it.
I was just thinking about how like A Nightmare on Elm Street's almost surrealist horror.
Yeah,
because
it is.
How he plays. Yeah.
Well, it's dreams, right? He goes through their nightmares. Yeah. It's very surrealist.
So,
actually,
like, even as a kid, like, I liked those types of films.
Absolutely.
And like looking back at it now, I feel like that was kind of like the first film that put me. Well,
or
that
even
Never-Ending Story. Even though,
yeah, or what's that one that he goes into the book? The Page Master.
Page Master.
That Page Master is like very surrealist as well. Actually, now that I think about it, I think a lot of children's stuff is surrealist, right? Like, think about the Care Bears, even. You know what I mean?
Winnie
something
the
stupid
Pooh
like
Christopher Robin going in the 100-acre wood is talking
very,
to a bear. And,
yeah, exactly. Because kids have imagination, and also that's where I've kind of tended to find it from too. Is that like I love the imaginative stuff because like. I think it is more unique to each person. Yeah. Like, I don't think anybody else would have ever made Eraserhead if David Lynch didn't do it. But when it comes to something like Top Gun, at the end of the day, if you have a different crew in there, I think Tom Cruise makes that movie. I agree. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to like the director or whatever the fuck, like I think probably most people could have gone in there and just done a fine job. Where like something like this takes very specific skill, talent, and creativity. Yeah, that's why I appreciate it.
Well, the film is definitely best watched using headphones because.
Oh yeah, that soundtrack or the audio really, because we watched it on surround sound in our living room, and I got how deep it was, and after I read it, especially, I really got that. But especially like the kind of like humming that you really get through headphones, it adds so much to the experience. And the second time around for me watching this was better than the first. Well, use the sound to
convey emotion perfectly, because each scene, as chaos ensues, and more layers of sound kind of get on top of each other and just create this overall like noise.
Yeah, it's an orchestra of machines.
And I specifically one of my favorite scenes in the movie is the lady in the radiator and singing in heaven. And you really like all of the things that David Lynch does in his films is deliberate. He has a reason for everything.
For sure.
And that's something that is very rare, especially with like mainstream directors and everything.
Yeah, I mean,
they just toss random stuff in there and think it should work.
Yeah, and he has an idea, but I think it is also important to say he doesn't really share what his ideas are.
No,
he still wants you to apply your own things. But yeah, I agree.
But
that
if I'm
seems
able
like he's
to
made with purpose.
interpret it like in a way, a deep meaning, like very easily, it's typically that means that everything has a purpose in that film.
Typically, I know. I like I said, I don't disagree with that. But that's the thing too I like about it is that it can also mean a bunch of different things depending on how you look at it. Like I said when we were watching it, my favorite interpretation of that scene is the fact that like that's kind of his ideal woman, and he dreams of this idea or promise of heaven that in the end of the day doesn't really exist and is just meant to placate somebody.
Bliss, and that's ignorance is heaven.
Sure, yeah, and also just like
being naive to the world and not understanding it completely.
To a degree, but I think that also though it actually shows here that it's quite the opposite. The fact that he doesn't know anything about this world, he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing. He's scared the entire time because I mean, look at every moment shows his anxiety.
Transition into adulthood. Once you become a father,
that's what I see. That's what I see the most here, and that's what I think there's. Two main lenses to look at this film through. The first one is the fact that David Lynch had a child, and that child had clubbed feet and had to go through massive surgery as a kid, and it was apparently very painful for the child, etc. And so one of the questions that is like a very hard question to ask, but is a valid question at the end of the day is, are some lives better off not lived? And that sounds really fucked up, and it is, because the world's fucked up. Like, at the end of the day, if you, get told, like, oh, yeah, your baby literally has a tumor the size of a walnut on its brain. It's never going to walk. It's going to be blind. I mean, I had there was a family friend that the daughter got pregnant at 16, had the child, and the child was blind and could barely eat, was never going to be able to walk, and they didn't think that the child would even make it past 2. And honestly, the child seemed like they suffered a lot. And I think that that's kind of partially what this gets into, as well as responsibility about parenthood, is that, yeah, like the kid being sick, that's a fear that most parents have. And then on top of that, the kid being sick and unfixable is another big fear. Like a parent, the second a kid has some issue, we usually would run them immediately to the doctors or whatever, because obviously when you have a child, the only thing you want to do is fix whatever the fuck is wrong.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, that's, I think the fact that he is also offhanded because he sees this child as like an abomination, not just of him and what he did with this woman having a baby out of wedlock, but an abomination physically as well because of how sick the child was. And I think those two combinations, I think it can be looked at as like a kind of like you mentioned a little yesterday, like an abortion type thing of like, yeah, in some situations the going the traditional route and marrying the girl and taking her home and etc. isn't the right way, because that leads often to not just unhappiness for you and the girl, but of your child usually as well. And I think this movie definitely tries to hit a lot of those really interesting kind of questions.
Yeah, it's just like the woman that he has the child with completely hates him and resents him and literally goes out and cheats. And then most people, that's the one reason why I love David Lynch. He literally sit there and said, okay, how can I sit there and showcase that she just cheated on him? Yes, I know, I'll make sperm that come out of her. And then he's basically, it's fucking great.
I love how these movies, like I've said a million times about Persona, for example, is that they have these scenes that are basically pornographic that don't cross the line. And I think that that's really interesting because it really does show how they had to like think around all these things. It's like, oh, I can't show her just going and fucking somebody, so I have to make it more surrealist and show this other thing, which was quite fascinating. Peter, do you have any theories on, like, for example, the girl in the radiator, or like any thoughts about the girl across the hall, or any aspects of the film specifically, or any questions even you might have?
Well, I was thinking we were talking about how it was spiritual and stuff.
So there's actually 3 lenses I think we can look it through. I think that is one of them, though. If you want to move on to that one, I think we can look at it through that lens as well.
Well, I just saw that he said apparently he read one, like he opened the Bible and read one verse, and that was when the film sort of clicked. And I found it quite interesting. A lot of people had, like, on Reddit different verses that they thought it was. But the main religious thing I got, having like a very narrow view, is it might have just been something about adultery, because literally the neighbor next door is like, what is it? There's like a whole verse like, do not covet thy neighbor's wife or whatever, which is like quite literally what this woman in the film is, I guess, just the wife next door, the adulteress.
For the more religious aspects of it, the thing that I kind of look at is, one, you have to combine these religious aspects with the fact that he was having a lot of issues, like I said, with the daughter, as well as he was having a lot of questions about his relationship and how this strained his relationship with his wife at the time, or I think it was the wife at the time, might have been a close girlfriend. And I think when you look at it that way as well, it kind of shows through those anxieties within the film, of anxiety of the world, anxiety of the woman, anxiety of this child, and all these. And then also you can see like that tinge of happiness for a moment between like when he gets home and sees the wife taking care of it, to then all of a sudden like he realizes she's deeply unhappy. But when it comes to like the main religious elements for me, I can see kind of like adultery, but I would mostly say that it seems like there is almost a fighting in a way that he does of the God character. So I think the person at the beginning and the person at the end that's holding and making these, like the sperm fall down and all that, is God. And I think that this is kind of his way of getting across the idea that God has in some ways forsaken us, and there is a Bible verse of Jesus saying, "Oh God, why have thou forsaken me?" for example. And I think that could even possibly be one, considering the fact that like this guy feels like he's been put into a situation that he like just had sex, which is something that is a natural thing to want to do, and he got fucked over through that process. And then at the end he fights back against God by killing the child, which is why God has this moment where he's trying to continue pushing that life spark forward but isn't able to. That's my analysis of it on like the religious front.
I would say like God doesn't make mistakes, and then you see this child that
has all these issues. That's an interesting idea as well. I can see that for sure.
Well, I'm glad we gave it a day as well, because it's definitely grown on me overnight.
Okay.
As it did yesterday. Though I think I definitely need to watch it again at some point.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those ones.
The first time through, I didn't completely understand. The second time, I just thoroughly looked at like everything, the cinematography of it all, and every scene, and kind of diagnosing it, because I knew it was kind of generally coming. So yeah, the second time through, I think you're able to really appreciate what the film is.
I mean, even if I got the whole thing, I just had like fucking. My thing was out of sync, and then my Discord crashed twice, and I was just like, dealing with all of that, whereas I should have been focusing on it. But it definitely grew on me overnight. I like more. I feel like I've analyzed it less, but I've been thinking so much about how the fuck it was filmed. Like the idea that he read like one Bible verse, and like millions of people just have, it might have been this one, it might have been that one. Or like I was reading, like the behind the scenes stuff is very interesting for me after this watch. Like I read that apparently the noises when the baby's dying were recordings of his daughter as well.
Okay, I didn't know that part. That's pretty interesting.
I don't know if that's true.
I mean, listen, I would again, like I know, like that's what I was trying to say is that like, his family life seemed to be pretty closely tied. So I would totally believe that. Was that your last bit there, or did you have anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so interesting, the dedication and stuff. I don't know, to me this feels on the furthest end of like expressionism that I've seen so far, or the most surrealist. Like a film, it's just so abstract.
Have you watched The Lighthouse?
Whereas no, not yet.
Oh shit. Oh, okay. Well, in that case, yeah, no, definitely. We're gonna get a lot. There's also the Holy Mountain, Holy Blood as well. There's a lot of shit.
I think it's probably his most surreal.
What was that?
Mulholland Drive is probably.
Mulholland Drive is not visually his most surrealist, but like on a story level, it's not linear. There's a lot of crazy, wacky characters that come in. So yeah, it is like one of his more surrealist and expressionist as well. So this isn't even, I would say, on the far end of Lynch.
I think I've seen Titan, Videodrome, and I Was Afraid are like the most surrealist stuff I've seen, but they have a very distinctive, I feel like, classic Hollywood plot and arcs and characters and stuff, whereas this is very different to that. So
Videodrome, the most you get is like the fact that you kind of get certain scenes where you don't know what he's seeing to be true or false, and so it kind of plays tricks on you in that way. But that's the most you get in Videodrome. You also do have those scenes where he like is whipping the TV with a fucking flog, and like he's in this red room. So like there are definitely those points
trying to figure out what was that really
and then he kills himself at the end. There's the whole TV thing. So I'd say like the practical effects are, but I get what you mean in the sense that it's set in the regular world and it's a fairly linear story, where this one, while it is kind of linear, it feels like it all takes place over a longer period of time than we actually see, considering his hair goes, the cheating thing happens, she comes back. We don't know how long it costs. So there's a lot of stuff missing. But like, have you seen Memento? I'd say Memento is very non-linear and almost abstract.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it like probably around the same time as The Dark Knight. What would that have been like?
2011
years ago. Yeah, it's been a very long time. So
2008.
Yeah, I think 2008
or 9. It's one of those. 2008, 9, or 10. Something. I think you're right.
I can't particularly remember it, but I have seen it.
American
Psycho.
Yeah, like I definitely think.
Too.
Oh, have you seen American Psycho?
American. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's
pretty surreal
because you're trying to figure out like, is he really killing these people?
No, that's a fantastic movie. Christian Bale, absolutely.
Actually, that
The Machinist is another one we'll have to show you. That one inspired The Recluse for the most part. So
I was like scrolling the Eraserhead like related films, and I was like, oh, there's a lot of films here that I've kind of seen that Letterboxd is tagging similarly. That I probably should rewatch and reanalyze.
Do you have an example? Or?
I mean, like Midsommar, Mother.
We haven't watched Mother because Jason hates what's her name, but I've been trying to.
I do not.
You hate Jennifer Lawrence.
After her most recent
You like Jennifer Lawrence now, so you'll watch Mother? Okay, fuck it. We're gonna watch Mother.
I don't want to watch Mother.
It's a surrealist horror film. What are you talking about? It's right up our alley.
Yeah, I think, don't they fuck her?
No, there's like a bunch of people that I think try to rape her though, or something.
I mean, yeah, like something like Mother and Midsommar, I think are much easier to analyze. But yeah, like the point that I was gonna make is like, of the films I've seen that are kind of surrealist, a lot of them are like much larger budget or just like big studio shit. Like I Was Afraid, I think has a massive budget with big actors and shit, whereas this is like, I remember saying when we were watching, like, I can't believe 10 minutes in, like, who greenlit this? Like, how did this get made?
Yeah.
And I even saw Leary reading the production and stuff, like the headmaster of his school, like when they said that they weren't going to greenlight it, he like threatened to quit. Unless they,
Dude, he went into the fucking voting session and was like, yo, this gets through. So here's the thing too, is that the reason there's the other lens that we can look at this through is basically Lynch came in and he said, hey, I want to do this film, and it was something called Greenback or something along those lines. Yeah. And then they were like, no,
which you would have fucking hated based on what I read.
What? Yeah,
it was like about like a insect growing.
Yeah. So actually, here's the thing: is that kind of my spiders are my main thing, but usually it's a beetle. So here's the main thing: is that the idea that he had was based off of reading Kafka's Metamorphosis, which I had mentioned to you. And Metamorphosis is all about this guy, and he obviously gets turned into a bug for some reason. And then what happens is he becomes more and more of a nuisance to his family. Like, he's in this room, they can't rent the room out, he can't work anymore, so he can't help them pay. They move somebody into his room, sooner or later they just forget that he's there, and one day he ends up getting stepped on or something along those lines. And then the family moves away, and they forget about him, and the daughter grows up to be like a beautiful young lady, and that's the end of the story. Now, there's a lot of ways you can read the story. One of them can be like how people can get addicted to things or can become evil versions of themselves, and how they can start bringing a family down, and how they become somewhat insectoid. The other thing is the more harsh way of reading it, which is that, again, some lives are not necessarily worth living. If you're going to have a disease that turns you into a bug, and there's a chance you're going to get smashed and you can't do anything, you can't live a normal life, everything else, then you probably would be better off. It's more humane to put that person out of their misery. I think that's also
kind of the vibe that I got from Eraserhead.
Yes.
Final act as well.
That's what I'm getting. So that's what I'm really getting at, is the fact that he wanted to make the original Greenback film, and then they told him no, and so finally this was the version he got through. And I saw this as literally just a more direct version, because in his idea he was going to have the guy just, I think one guy and a girlfriend or something like that, and he starts to grow a bug on his back, so it was going to be much more surreal. Where this one takes it and it's like, no, we're going to give you a mother, we're going to give you a father, and then we're going to give you the kid, which is the beetle. And that's the way that I really read this film. And then that's why it also leads me back to kind of the abortion thing, where I read it as like, oh, this is kind of a struggle with God and a struggle with religion, because also on a moral level, is it okay to let that fucking kid live that way where his swaddle is his skin? No. Obviously that kid would be suffering, and the kid got sick very easily. There's so much wrong there that it makes sense what the end of that was. So that's definitely my main reading of it, is that like it's probably something around those lines, and then also just intertwines his predominant fear of adultery, because he said that he was very obsessed with sex as a young man, which a lot of young men are, and so like that led him to realize the dangers of Hollywood as well. So one thing that you might find in later Lynch films is when he realizes what Hollywood is, things like Mulholland Drive are anti-Hollywood. It kind of shows the darker underbelly of how it treats the people, and particularly the women. And one common theme he always has is women, for some reason, either shooting porn or going and becoming like prostitutes. That happens in like Lost Highway, Mulholland Drive, like a Blue Velvet, like all these things for some reason have specifically that trope. And I call it the David Lynch trope. So I think that for the most part, I think he does just interweave a lot of his main like anxieties with it, but also that's why I would say that this one is much more straightforward to analyze, because it seems like those kind of ideas, it's got to be one of those three lenses, honestly, that it probably can be looked at through. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely curious to see what other like surrealist films, especially when we get to some of the more like, there's another one called Brazil, for example. That one was done by the guy from Monty Python. Like he fucking made this weird surrealist film about a government. There's a lot of very crazy ones. So yeah, this one though, I will admit, like obviously like with the overt sexual tones of like the sperm and shit, like obviously that is for a lot of people kind of off-putting. But yeah, it is just like very good at setting up that atmosphere and knocking that down and really making you not know what's going to happen. For sure.
The most off-putting thing in hindsight that I wanted to ask about, which I think just maybe doesn't have a great answer, but the actual Eraserhead stuff.
Yeah.
All I could find was that he obviously was reading all those books that you mentioned, and then had like hit his head or some shit and just had like a fucking vision of the Eraserhead scene.
Yeah.
And obviously that is in the film, but even thinking back on it, I can't get what is supposed to be, what that scene's supposed to be about. How like,
so what I took it as
see some analysis, but I can't see how it connects to the rest, or like.
Yeah, I think it actually usually... See, I don't necessarily know if it connects fully to the rest in a satisfying way. The way that I look at that is it seems like there's this anxious young man who then loses his head literally and then gets used to turn into a writing utensil. So like you go from being psychotic to becoming this thing that is literally meant to put forward thoughts and ideas. And I think that that's a good way to represent the artist, considering a lot of what artists do is go into the dark, lose their fucking mind, and then come back with something beautiful.
I think one part of it is the fact that he's can write his own story and has the ability to erase this abomination just by simply snipping the bandages. And
I can see that too.
He becomes
like
the eraser in that moment, because then he can erase what was a mistake in his eyes, as well as the woman who just up and left him.
That's fair. The other reason that I say the artist one though too is because there is a running theme of the stage. So when he loses his head, he's on stage, for example. He sings this high note, and then he loses his head. There's the lady, obviously, that's on the stage.
I think it's like almost steam from a radiator.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's what it seems like. And so, like, I think that there is some degree. I think that both of those are like good analysis, though, for sure. I can definitely see it becoming like, oh, he's the eraser of the pain of this child. So I could totally see that for sure. But I think it is probably one of those ones that has a less clear answer, and probably more is like, oh, he had a vision and he wanted to fit it in. I will admit that Lynch does do that. Lynch will have a thing where it's like he doesn't fully have a reason, but he wants to have it in there because like it's something that he foresaw. And I think that's why when you get to something like Inland Empire, where it's like totally just off the fucking rails, that like you get some of the craziest, like weirdest shit for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely in both Inland and
Already did.
And Mulholland Drive, essentially having like scenes that are plugged in these films that they just don't feel like they belong, but when you really analyze it, you kind of find a way to connect them. Because there's essentially this rabbit scene, and that's kind of what opens up Mulholland Drive, and it's very
No, that's Inland Empire.
Oh, okay, well that's
Yeah, the rabbits are Inland Empire. Real quick, Casey Yancey said, didn't y'all get banned for streaming this Stifling and Shunt fight? No, I have no idea what you're talking about. I would never break copyright law like that. That's ridiculous. Anyway.
We're finding ways.
Yeah, listen, we got back somehow. That's all that matters, all right? But yeah. Go ahead.
Where do you guys rank this in terms of his filmography?
I really like things like Lost Highway. Mulholland, I think might edge it out, but I'd have to watch Mulholland again and kind of analyze it with you guys. Mulholland, I love the analysis more, but I think maybe the viewing experience of this movie overtakes that. But I would say that definitely they're both at the very least in my top 10, and one of them is probably in my top 3. But I would say that this one ranks.
His films?
Yeah, of his films. No, period. No, period. I would
put
this up there. Period.
I was like, he's only got like 10 films.
No, I would put this up there. Yeah, he has like 6, 7 films, something like that. But yeah, I would put this up there with just like both of those would be in my top 10 films of all time. And then one of them would probably be in my top 3. I'd probably have Mulholland in my top 3.
This is one of your favorites of his.
This is like probably my first or second favorite. It's up there tying kind of with Mulholland.
I think Twin Peaks would probably be near the bottom if I was
mean, you never watched more than 2 episodes.
No, like the movie.
Oh, but the movie doesn't make sense unless you see the show. Yeah, the movie doesn't make sense unless you see the show. But yeah, I think that it definitely it probably would go like Mulholland, Eraserhead, Lost Highway, Blue Velvet, A Wild at Heart, and then I can't remember what his other ones are, but that would probably be like the general start of the order. Let's see here.
I had it right here. Elephant Man, Dune.
Oh, Dune is bad. Man. Elephant Man is really good. So I would go. Let's see. I'd go Mulholland, Eraserhead, Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, Lost Highway, Wild at Heart, Twin Peaks movie, Dune, and then Inland Empire. And I haven't seen The Straight Story. That'd be my general order.
Yeah, I'd be very interested to know, once you watch Inland Empire, Peter, what your thoughts are, because I like it more than Rocky. I personally...
Yeah, it's not like the worst film in the world. It's the weirdest shot.
I don't think it...
If you didn't get into this right away...
Dune is really bad.
You fell asleep.
Well,
we watched 30 twice. Minutes. No, we didn't.
I'm pretty sure.
We watched the first half and then we watched the second half, and you fell asleep both fucking times. You don't remember any of the story. Anyway, back to it.
I definitely think genres like this are acquired tastes.
Uh-huh.
I haven't gotten into many other film genres, but when you get into other anime genres, the more you get into it, the more you understand the tropes, the aspects, blah 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 blah, and then the more abstract types of that genre make more sense. So I feel like the more of these films I watch, the more I'll probably appreciate them when I go back to them.
Maybe I think that really the main thing is there has to be an appreciation for the what the fuck factor. So for me, the what the fuck factor makes it 10 million times better. I love that not knowing Videodrome, not knowing what the fuck happened at the end and not understanding it was I fucking love this, because the whole time my brain is just running while watching it. So something like that for me is like so mentally stimulating that like when I watch something like Top Gun Maverick, I want to blow my brains out. Like I'd be much rather better watch freaking like something like this. So like, and especially things like Fast X too. Like after you like because again for me, I'm a very autistic person. So when I get into something like this and then I go back over to something like Fast X, it just made me realize how bad a lot of fucking cinema really is. And then also going back to even non-surrealist films from the 60s and 70s and 80s, it's like, yeah, there was just so much better cinema, it seems, except for the indie stuff. The indie stuff of today I enjoy quite a bit still. I think it's still like thriving, but definitely it feels like mainstream has just been like crushed down.
Fast 10 is one of the worst movies in film history.
That's bullshit.
There's nothing there's nothing good about that movie. Like, there's nothing good, great, amazing. Everything is just below average. It's just terrible because the characters suck. Yeah. There's no logic behind any of it. The cinematography's trash. It's just all bad. The soundtrack is the worst soundtrack out of all the Fast and Furious movies. It's yeah. So that is
pretty bad, yeah.
Yeah, that to me is just really terrible. But
yeah, but yeah, I think that like definitely though, for at least on the analysis side, I think that's the thing that can be appreciated more the more you watch these, because once you kind of like watch a few of them and you get kind of the different tastes of the genre, then you can kind of apply different lenses, or you can use certain analysis to look at certain films in certain ways. So I think that is definitely a thing. But again, I think the viewing factor, like of like, oh, I'm enjoying like viewing this, not just the analysis, definitely is like I have to be kind of like into the what the fuck factor. So but I think that there is definitely much less people, especially these days, that are willing to get into like these types of films, which is fair. I mean, I fully understand. It's definitely not for everybody, but yeah.
I wish my fucking father had recommended like Videodrome as opposed to Fast and Furious 4.
Dude, no, 100%. Yeah,
the biggest thing is like with Lynch films, especially like with something like Eraserhead, he does not hold your hand at all, and you kind of see that in like Eraserhead, where it's just like a lot of craziness happens, but if you just think about it logically and you have the ability to kind of analyze the entire film, it's one of the best films that you'll ever watch. But if you're one of those people that thinks Marvel is peak and all their, like, that's holding your hand essentially like a child, which is why those movies are made for children. I actually came around on that fact, so because Rocky had said it.
Jason.
The thing that's definitely come around for me is like, as much as it is so abstract, I guess, the actual central plot is like very, in a good way, I think, straightforward. Like, it's not some super fucking abstract visuals with an abstract plot like Beau is Afraid, where it makes no sense no matter how you think about it unless you actually start analyzing it, where it's actually just like it's a man with a wife and a child dealing with that anxiety, blah 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 blah. Like, there's some actual really simplistic, like, you can pitch it
absolutely
to like someone and it's like, oh, that makes sense. Whereas something like Titane and Beau is Afraid, it's much harder to pitch what the actual core plot is.
Absolutely.
I think it's what I started layers.
Thinking that I liked.
That's what I was saying. Films. That's what I was saying was like the why we should start with Eraserhead is because like when you get over, I think Elephant Man is also probably his actually most straightforward.
That to me that is more of a, because it is kind of more of a biography type film.
It's a mainstream film. It was big at the time. He did it with a lot of
the acting is extremely well.
Dude, it has fucking
Anthony Hopkins.
Anthony Hopkins, 100%. Heck, you can't hate Anthony Hopkins. He's the main guy besides.
And it was based on a real person, which is even crazier.
James Merrick.
Yeah.
Great fucking film.
Is it John Merrick?
John Merrick, you're right. John Merrick. But yeah, I think that's why, like, again, like something like Mulholland Drive would be a hard one to toss you directly in on, because there are various things that it's like, oh no, none of this makes any sense anymore. Or like even Lost Highway, I would say, is pretty heady at the end, particularly. But yeah, definitely Eraserhead. It's just like, yeah, no, there's a guy. He's anxious about having this family. He's also thinking of fucking other women. The wife isn't like honest. He chose a woman that he didn't honestly know very well. He didn't know her parents. The parents thing is great too. Yeah, go ahead.
It's still like very. I can't think of the right words because it's not like tough. So it's not like, oh, I didn't like this film, it was too tough to watch. But it's tough to watch through as a first style of these films where you open with like a 10-minute sex scene or whatever, where it's like completely surreal. Like it does have a good central element, but it is still very abstract.
It's kind of heady at the beginning, I suppose. But again, I think that's the thing with Lynch films. You can look at them as heady, or you can look at them very straightforward. Like, again, like, that's literally just God putting a baby on Earth. Bam, done. Like, that's all it is.
Yeah.
Like that's the... Or it can be literally the fighting against the spark of life and everything. Inland Empire is a good example. It's a fucking 3.5-hour movie. You know what it is? It's literally just a prostitute who gets murdered. That's it. Whole movie. But if you watch it, it has all these insane scenes of, like, this scenes that are out of order. Laura Dern goes like through the back of a set and then comes around and sees another copy of herself and all this other shit. But at the end of the day, the whole film is literally just about the ghost of this prostitute. That's it. So like, I always found that to be an interesting thing about these films, is that there is a pretty straightforward way where when it looks like something like Santa Sangre, when you get over to things like Jodorowsky, when you get over to things like Requiem for a Dream, right? If you start like, have you seen Requiem for a Dream?
Sunshine of Spotless Mind is very surreal, which is why I love it.
Exactly, it is. Or like, oh fuck, what's the one where they can read people's minds and like and see if they're going to commit a crime?
What women want?
No, it was where you can see if you commit a crime.
Minority Report.
Yeah, Minority Report. Yeah, that has definitely surrealist aspects. So, yeah, there are definitely a lot of those types of things for sure.
I have one thing on the film and then one thing for you guys. I think what you said earlier, like, there are films like, probably not a good example across the Spider-Verse, but there are films that are like in Hollywood style, can really be done by anyone, but like a really good film can only be done that exact way really well by a really good director. Like Oppenheimer, anyone could do Oppenheimer, it's still good.
Yeah.
But you only get the great film because of Nolan. Whereas this film is like, you can only do this with this kind of like exact director and their vision.
Yeah, his mind.
No one else could really dive into making this.
Yeah, I think things like Requiem for a Dream too, that they have that where it's like clearly this person had some struggle they went through, or etc. Or you get to the real ones that are absolutely psychotic that even I get a little weirded out by are the psychedelic ones where it'll be like, I can't I can't remember the name of it, but Altered States, dude. I've only watched about 5 minutes of that film, and it already boggles my mind. And especially if I'm tripping, it makes me have a bad trip watching those films. So I literally just usually stay away from shit.
Everything Everywhere All at Once is so real.
Everything Everywhere All at Once. We watched it on mushrooms when we first, like, we didn't know if it was going to be like one of the best films ever. We started watching it on mushrooms, and it was so fucking intense and fast paced that we literally had to like stop. I was like, I can't handle this right now. It's making my head spin. Or there was a movie with Ron Perlman where these guys found this like drug that put them into another dimension, and in the other dimension they had to kill a large amount of spiders, and I didn't know that until, and I was on acid, I didn't know that until the end of the film when it came on, and immediately I just started having a bad trip. So there are, and
Cronenberg definitely has surreal stuff. Existence
Naked Lunch makes no sense.
Existence it has is very surreal.
I'd say Existence is pretty straightforward.
Like there's it's certain things in
they just go into a video game.
Yeah, and you're still, but at the end you're questioning what is real.
Well, that's the intent of the film to a degree, for sure. Yeah, 100%. But Naked Lunch is like very much like, what the fuck, you know what I mean?
Yeah, Naked Lunch gets boring.
It gets boring and it gets very heady for sure. But yeah. Anyway, back to you, Peter. Was there another thing that you had?
Have you guys seen Mandy?
Yeah. You talk about the Nicolas Cage movie? Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the recommended ones.
Okay,
well.
so have you seen that?
It.
You stopped watching it?
Yeah, I stopped watching it like 15, 20 minutes in, something like that.
Dude, that's one of those psychedelic films. I bring it up to Jason a lot. Jason hasn't seen it as far as I know. But basically that's the one where there's like the fucking biker or gang then as well. The biker gang's at the end, I think. And then there's also the cult and the guy is the leader. He wants to fuck his wife. He comes in, takes him, and then fucking Nicolas Cage goes through a psychedelic journey on Molly. Or acid, or both.
I think so.
I think it was both. I think it was both.
What's
Molly and
the
acid.
one with Johnny Depp? That's surreal.
Fuck, that's
the one listed here with Johnny Depp is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Fuck, I love that fucking book too. It's by
Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah, Fear and Loathing.
Yeah, that's that
Fear
is
and Loathing
surreal.
is
I fucking love that. That
well,
to me
also,
is
it's
Johnny,
one of
Johnny Depp's best films easily.
Yeah, well, it's also by Hunter S. Thompson, which was like the craziest journalist that we had. That literally would write real stories, but he would take acid while he experiences them, and then he'd mix his acid experience into his journalism. It was surrealist
I think
journalism.
he did a lot of Rolling Stone stuff.
He did do a lot of Rolling Stone stuff. He did the stuff on Hell's Angels, which is a biker gang in San Francisco. He was very close to the drug trade, and he like would do all sorts of crazy amounts of drugs. And yeah, he would make surrealist journalism, and it was called Gonzo journalism. It was like this crazy
real Hell's Angel type film.
Yes, no, I know, dude. Trust me, I need to go to Hunter S. Thompson shit. That's one of my faves of all time. Alongside Agatha Christie.
Yeah, yeah, Agatha Christie's great too.
Absolutely.
But Peter, you had said that you had something for us.
I think that's what it was. Have we seen Mandy?
Have you seen? Yeah.
Have you guys seen The Northman?
Yes.
The Northman. So I don't remember.
You guys like it?
I didn't like it.
I know we watched it.
I really love Eggers. I love The Witch. I love The Lighthouse. The Northman was boring as fuck. And
10,000
straightforward.
BC is the vibe I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what fucked me because I didn't get around to The Witch or The Lighthouse, but when that came out, my friends wanted to see it, so we went and watched it, and it was just not bad. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll hold off on watching The Lighthouse and The Witch. Because the other thing is, it was very highly reviewed as well, and I was like, "Did I?"
That's
just
because
not get
it's
Eggers?
No. Eggers has a large amount of dick suckers. I will admit. And now I am one of them for The Lighthouse, but even I will admit that, like, because when I remember before it came out,
doing Nosferatu.
He is doing Nosferatu. That's what I texted you earlier.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that because it is a return to horror. When I saw The Northman, I was willing to give it a try. But like the thing that he does best is he takes these old tales and he puts a little twist on them. So he takes these folk tales of like, say, like the Witch, or like even The Lighthouse was based on an Edgar Allan Poe like thing that was unfinished and he died before he finished it. So like when they take things like that and then he expands upon it. I think he has a brother that he does it with. That's when he does his best. But when he goes out and he like tries to do The Northman, which is this more mainstream epic story, he had all these great actors and they did good, but the story was so basic compared to what I know from Eggers that it's like if you went in expecting like, oh, this guy's one of the best directors out there right now, which is what I was thinking, it was very fucking disappointing to like see how badly paced that movie was.
That's his Dune.
That's his Dune, I would say. Sure, yeah, I can agree with it because it was mainstream. But people liked it, and I think it is.
I mean, he might get like Lily Rose Depp an Oscar with
dude.
Nosferatu.
But that's Nosferatu's an old tale that I think he can put a little bit of a twist on. That I'm hoping that I'm
very interested to know how he shoots it and what the color grading is going to be.
Well, he was
like.
saying that they were actually. So if you guys, I'm guessing haven't seen the actual Nosferatu film.
No, I remember it was black and white. It was a silent film. Yeah. I'm pretty sure.
Okay, it is a silent film, and basically it starts with Count Orlok coming in on a boat, and he releases rats.
Watched a great mockumentary, I guess.
We did, yeah. There's The Shadow of the Vampire, 2000. It was made in 2000.
Fantastic.
It has Willem Dafoe, and it's basically about the shooting of Nosferatu.
Is it John Malkovich?
John Malkovich,
yes,
and Willem Dafoe, and it's about the shooting of Nosferatu. But it's basically saying that like the guy who played Nosferatu really was a vampire. So that's basically what. So Willem Dafoe plays a vampire that's pretending to be an actor. It's this really fucking.
And Willem Dafoe as Nosferatu is one of the greatest things that you'll see.
What was it called?
Shadow of the Vampire, I believe. If you look up Willem Dafoe Nosferatu,
Shadows
it won't come up anymore.
Shadows of the Vampire. That's Taika Waititi thing.
No, that's the What We Do in the Shadows.
Oh, What We Do in the Shadows.
That's a different
one. Okay.
Found it? Yeah, dude, that movie is really funny. But with this one, so basically Count Orlok comes in on a ship. Yeah, the pictures are funny, dude.
Yeah,
I thought he was going to be playing it again.
He looks like Count Chocula. I'm not going to lie. He looks like Count Chocula on the fucking box. He's just missing that coat.
The images look great. And then the first review I read was like, this movie is a documentary where Willem Dafoe is an actual vampire.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's amazing. It's amazing. But it's a Count Orlok comes in on a boat. And he lets all these rats out, and then he leaves on a boat at the end, and it's supposed to be like the plague and him bringing in disease. Now, the main thing is that he apparently, Eggers said that they were shooting on a ship where it was like raining outside, and so like he was talking about how he was having issues with like the lens deflector for the rain. But overall, it seems like he's going to be adding a bit of stuff to the original story, and the main thing that I'm curious to see is just how it turns out being a talking film now. And considering it has such a good cast, like Nicholas Hoult plays like the guy who's married to Lily Rose Depp. You have fucking who was it that was playing Count Orlok again?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I can't remember either. But it was a pretty good casting. So yeah, there was like so much. Aaron Taylor Johnson's in there for some reason as well, which is fucking hilarious. So yeah, no, I'm excited for that. But definitely, I think also watching Eggers, you have to start with The Witch really. And then probably go over to Lighthouse because The Witch is like far more straightforward and easy to watch.
Bill.
Yeah, Bill Skarsgård. That's right. He plays Count Orlok. That's fucking banger. I can't wait to see that.
Casting.
Yeah, it is a great casting. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, hey, I'm excited, and we'll see.
He likes working with Skarsgårds.
Well, yeah. What's wrong with that? They're great. They're talented.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, I think that.
And your name too, Jason Skarsgård.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. You'll get casted.
Like I'm the long lost brother of Bill.
I spaced out of my head to the depths of the universe. It's a spell or a chance just to open up a new world.